Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to tonight's Education Committee meeting. We are going live at 6:01, calling the meeting to order. And I'd like to acknowledge that with great respect and humility, we acknowledge and honor the lands of the Tsuut'ina people. The Tsuut'ina people maintain their profound, unique, and spiritual connections to the land through ageless traditions, teachings, stewardship, and expressions of reciprocity. I'd like to acknowledge also that some of us are coming into this meeting tonight from Tsinawas and Snuneymuxw, our two other territories which encompass the district, and we welcome everyone, and we're happy to be here. First now is, do we have any additions or deletions to tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Any changes in order? Okay, seeing none, I'd call for a motion to approve the agenda, please. Moved by Trustee Keller and seconded by Trustee Barron. Anyone opposed to moving the agenda, approving the agenda as presented? Okay, thank you very much. All right, tonight we are starting with a presentation from staff regarding our restart plans. And as staff gets ready, I just want to share something I wrote, which I went over with Trustee Chair McKay and Mr. Saywell before I brought it forward. I just want to say that we as a board understand that a lot of people, our students and families, are feeling a lot of unusual stress and anxiety right now due to COVID-19. And while we believe there's no substitute for ongoing in-class learning, we realize families may experience attendance difficulties for multiple reasons. And as such, we are going to continue to support our families to the best of our ability, as we have in the past, through individual supports as needed. So with that, I know that we will be probably hearing more about these things. About that, and I just noticed I did forget to do the minutes from the our June meeting. So I am going to call for a motion to accept those. Oh, no, pardon, Trustee? Oh, moved. Okay, got it. Thank you, Trustee Higginson and Trustee Keller. Any opposition to those minutes? All right, carried unanimously. Apologies for that. And now, Mr. Saywell, I will hand it over to you and the Learning Services team to present your information on restart.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So we'll be doing these restart updates regularly at the Education Committee, Business Committee, and board meetings for a little bit, just to keep people informed about of what's happening. So we're very busy, of course. The staff have been in for the last couple days learning about all the new health and safety regulations. Central registration has gone a little bit crazy over the last couple days with all manner of new registrations and people changing their mind last minute, which is completely understandable, moving either into DL, but a lot of families are choosing to move out of DL recently. Some of those are going back to in-class instruction, but the majority are opting for our transition learning program that wasn't announced very long ago, so we appreciate that parents are making these last-minute decisions. We're going to send out a communication, if it didn't go out today already, in the morning, and ask that parents, the music's going to stop Friday afternoon at 12 p.m. and that'll be their last opportunity to finalize their decisions on programming. I wanted to share sort of personal insight from my perspective as a parent with a student at ND. And I know this type of communication is happening around the district with principals, in this case, acting principal, Ricky Bartlett. I'm going to share her email to me in a second, but I want to I want to share how much information as a parent I've received from the school around this safety orientation week and when students are coming in. So I can share at ND tomorrow, Thursday in the morning, grade 11 and 12 students are coming in for their safety orientation. Grade 9 and 10 students will be in the afternoon from 12:45 to 1:45. And Friday morning from 9:30 to 11, grade 8 students have the school alter themselves. What came along with this email was, as well, parents were able to look on MyEdBC and discover what their son or daughter's timetable would look like. So I looked that up. And corresponding graph that goes with your timetable, I'm just going to bring it up on the screen here. So you can see this beautiful color-coded diagram that it shows. This is the first floor of ND, and what it does is it shows students, depending on what their A block class is, what entrance they'll be using, and it's all color-coded as well for the second floor. So students will enter the building at a specific time, so they're staggering the start times as well, and they will enter at in a specific entrance. So they're keeping the cohorts, the learning groups, apart very well. Lastly, I just wanted to share a little piece of this email from Acting Principal Bartlett, because it really hit me. So I'm going to read the last part of this email. It says, since 1985, when I started kindergarten, I remember being excited and having this great energy around the start of school. Even as a university student, a classroom teacher, and now with principal, that energy and excitement for a new year to begin still exists in many of the same ways. This year does feel different. The changes, the anticipation of the unknown, the much more rigid structure are the things that we are all focused on. But I want you to know that I still hold that excitement for the start of this year. My energy is very much present, and I'm ready to see our students of NDSS walk through those doors. This year will be different than the rest, but I promise to offer opportunities for a vibrant educational experience, a positive school culture, and a safe environment for all students within the walls of NDSS. We sincerely wish you a fabulous Labor Day weekend, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care and stay safe. That's really just a typical email that principals sent out before the weekend. And then they got to work on the weekend. They spent the entire weekend there putting the final touches on their timetable. And so I raise my hands to all the principals and vice principals out there who have done an enormous job very well and ensuring our schools are as safe as they possibly can be with the startup. I'm going to share one more thing that relates to this idea of compassionate schools. Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, this is from our principal at Learning Alternatives, Brett Hancock. He tweeted this out, and it's quite a simple statement, but I really appreciated it and wanted to share it with you. I think sometimes we get all wrapped up in really being perfect, and what this speaks to, perfection is sometimes the enemy of doing good work. And here's what Brett said with his staff and a message for students. My goals for the year: keep you safe, lower your anxiety about our new normal, make you laugh, make you feel cared about, and finally, teach you something, all in that order. And I think you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here, we have, I think you can see the GIF. It's President Obama dropping the mic, and that was from one of our staff members, Loa Richardson. I thought that was well said. I think it's a good message for our entire school district, in fact. And I'm looking forward to students getting back tomorrow and school starting in a regular way next Monday. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Secretary Treasurer Walsh to talk a little bit about PPE, maybe a few of the financial implications we're dealing with, and to talk a little bit about a good news item, which is cashless schools.
Through you, Chair. So thank you very much for the opportunity to highlight a couple of items. And so we have been striving very, very hard to communicate all of the efforts that are being done centrally and at our schools to ensure that people realize how safe indeed we are and how we are planning to meet the requirements or the health and safety requirements that we have. So we've talked a number of times, but it's always worth repeating that we're increasing cleaning staff by 25%. That involved some shuffling, so there's some new caretakers in schools on a temporary basis in the daytime. That all started, I guess, today, and so we're ready to go with our caretaker to meet the requirements of wiping down frequently touched surfaces. Our hand hygiene program is now moving on from just making sure that water is accessible and sinks and portables are accessible to the expansion of hot water availability and examining things like touchless sinks that are going to make our schools, not just in the immediate term, but in the long term, able to address hygiene issues. Today, we've also kitted out all of our new caretakers who are now reassigned to their schools with all their protective equipment for the Clorox spraying in the evening. One concern that we've been monitoring very closely is our face masks. So very early on in the process, we did an order of reusable masks to get everyone to get our requirements for 2 for staff. As well as opportunities for our students to have reusable masks as well. But knowing the high demand across the entire country and the province, we also made sure that we had a backup on hand. So we've received tens of thousands of reusable masks that are going to get us through, and because we haven't received all of our tens of thousands of disposable masks because we haven't yet received all of our reusables, but they are coming in by the day. So we've got 10,000 of our reusables out to schools. We've got 30,000 disposable masks, more than 30,000 disposable masks out to schools all as well. We've got some, and I will say some, but they are limited in scope, which are masks that have a visibility around the mouth. So there's a screen along the mouth, so educators can work with students that require that. We also received 880 face shields for free from the provincial Focus Education. And so they've just arrived, or they partially arrived last week, and more have arrived today. And I just want to really credit and just to show that every single person in the school district is working 100% to help our kids and to support the safety of staff and students. Our purchasing and finance department out of the board office on their way home today was delivering every single face shield and reusable and disposable that we've received today. And so just kudos to that group to make sure that schools are feeling even safer. So we're ready. We're ready for tomorrow. We're ready for Friday. We're ready for next week. And as we get more reusables, we'll start shipping them out to schools as they come in. I also want to credit our finance department and our communications department for cashless schools. So this is something that I think the board was interested generally as options for parents. So we can, pay fees, you can, pay the various field trips, etc., directly with cashless. And so Mr. Burgos took it upon himself, working with his team, to actually start getting our forms for our parents also on through this system. And so what we're doing is we're not going to have contact. We're not going to have paper to minimize that contact. So it was a very, not just for COVID, of course, but boy, did it ever have a great synergy to support our safety in schools. So I think that would be generally where we're at. I think from an operational perspective, we're feeling very, very confident in the safe return to schools, and certainly subject to questions. That would be a update.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Walsh. I think we'll turn it over to the Learning Services Department to give a little more of an update. And I see Assistant Superintendent Tate. So we'll do the elementary programs first. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And through the chair, good evening, everyone. I would also like to thank the chair for the words that you shared to the public today, because all of those sentiments, we feel the same way. So I appreciate the words that you shared today with everyone. Okay, so quick elementary update. Just update you on a few things that we've discussed previously, but just a little bit more information. So I'll just start really quickly with an update around recess, as this was a topic of conversation the last time we were together. We have, everyone has submitted their plans. We have a few schools that are able to have full recess with everyone outside at the same time. We have a few schools who've requested to stagger the recess for very, very specific reasons that are very contextualized to their situation, their school, and their population. But the majority of schools have established zones or areas. So a few examples. One school has 4 zones that have been established on school grounds for supervisory purposes. One supervisor will be assigned to each area rather than floating around. So there are 4 supervisors at recess, 1 per zone. Another school has zones for the playground specific to groups, and those groups rotate. Those different areas. Another school has 8 zones. We have primary rotates through 4 zones and intermediate rotates through a different 4 zones. Another school has 6 different spaces on their property, and these learning groups will rotate to new spaces on a daily basis. Another school has 3 sets of climbing apparatus, and each dedicated to a different learning group for the day, field spaces to be sectioned off for the 7 learning groups. And my last example is a playground divided into 5 areas based on grade levels. The field divided into 2 areas, primary and intermediate, as the fields aren't used by many students, so there's enough room to have enough physical distancing. So those are just some examples of some of the ideas and the strategies that some elementary schools are using with regards to zones. So zones are the majority of the approach for most of our schools. And just a reminder that all schools have supervision outside. And schools will be and continue to orient and teach and reinforce health and safety practices with students all year long. So schools are welcoming students back this week as well. They have welcomed their staff back this week. So at the elementary level, starting tomorrow and Friday, as you'll remember, we have half the students coming in tomorrow and the other half coming in Friday. They will have their own versions of health, age appropriate versions of their health and safety orientations. We've had staff provide teachers of varying levels of activity sheets and information sheets to help support them provide this health and safety orientation to their students. And students have the opportunity as well to practice entry and exit protocols at the beginning of the day, end of the day, or end of their 2 hours, and also at recess. Work out some of those bugs. Schools have their classes organized. However, as the superintendent has alluded to and mentioned, we continue to receive requests from families. So we're still, trying to maintain flexibility as we do that, and we'll hinge quite a bit on this deadline that the superintendent's mentioned, which will be Friday at noon. Things can solidify a little bit after that point. So it's only day 2 of school, so students haven't been in yet, but staffs have been in since Monday, and they've enjoyed time back with their colleagues, their peers and their colleagues for sure. They've been working on their class organizations. Things have been pretty fluid, a lot of movement and transition back and forth in between different choices and programs. Staff has themselves gone through their own health and safety orientations. They've reviewed the guidelines. We've had, staff, not only do principals and managers have guidelines, but we've created sort of summary documents for staff, for their staff as well around the guidelines. Schools continue to phone families just to check in. Have they made a decision? Have they changed a decision? How can I help you? What can we do? Teachers, of course, are organizing their classrooms and their learning spaces as they would do any year, but this year will have a particular flair to it. Our inclusion support team has been reaching out already to schools to connect around their more complex learners. And we've already had a district HR has facilitated a beautiful new staff orientation, which included health and safety components, as well as just a welcome and an orientation to the district as a whole. So, and overlaying all of this, I've mentioned before, not only for staff and for students, is the notion of health and safety, but also well-being, social emotional well-being, not only with staff, adults, but also getting prepared to have students coming in tomorrow. We want everyone to feel welcome and safe and just coming through the door and feeling calm as much as possible and ready to learn. And so that will be woven into everything that we do, not only now, but throughout the year. It's woven into our teaching, teaching and learning components as well. So I would love to turn it over to Director of Instruction, Jackie Poulin, who will give us a quick update on the teaching and learning.
Just before you do that, I think there's a question from Trustee Barron.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. Apologies to our Assistant Superintendent Tate. Thank you so much for all your information, but my question's actually a little bit delayed and intended for our Secretary Treasurer Walsh around some information that he presented before. So I apologize for having us backtrack slightly and appreciate that information. But I'm wondering, Secretary Treasurer, if you could please clarify. I am not at all surprised to hear the level of preparedness and that we've had around ordering these masks ahead of time and the amount of masks that are coming in. I'm just running all these numbers through my head here that you've presented, and I'm noticing that there are significantly more masks than shields. And I'm wondering if you could clarify a little bit, are all staff going to be provided with masks tomorrow? And how are we going to be distributing masks or shields? I apologize if there's only 880. Just hoping if I can get some clarification.
So the shields will be based off of staff demand, and so face shields are not a requirement of the guidelines. And so in the event, so there's enough shields. Well, there's shields at every single school to go around tomorrow. And if staff demand outweighs our face shield supply, we'll purchase more. They're relatively easy to acquire. But that's the one thing, given that they're not a requirement, we are going to make them available to all staff, but it will be based on demand, whereas masks are obviously a different story, and there's enough to suit everyone at schools. There's a few more reusables to come in, of course, and so we're trying to overshoot that. And so if we run short on reusables in this week or next week, we'll have the disposables as the backup. But again, the face shields are not a requirement under the guidelines there, but we've committed to making them an option for staff, and so we're going to see what those numbers look like and get more if required.
Could I ask a follow-up, Chair? You're just muted, but I think you said yes?
Yes,
Okay,
I was going to say yes, you may.
Thanks. Oh, apologies.
No, it's okay.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information, Secretary Treasurer. Just to clarify, how are we going to determine, how is demand determined for the face shields? I'm just trying to understand that a little bit more just for clarity. How do we know if, is it based on a staff member asking or requesting for a shield? And is that the sole requirement, that they are asking for one to determine demand?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Great, thank you, Trustee Barron. All right, I will now give it back to you, Ms. Tate. You were saying next would be, who's
I'll
next?
backtrack a little bit if I can, Chair.
Yeah, for sure.
I was flowing so quickly, I need to pause for a minute, so I appreciated the pause. I will actually turn it over to my colleague, Assistant Superintendent Balcom, for an update around secondary schools.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, I'll be the next person in line to acknowledge the great work that's been happening in the system in preparations for students returning tomorrow for the first time, and for some of them in many months. So huge thank you to our staff who've been working diligently to put these plans in place. And I know previously we've talked about the restart plan and some questions around how students are going to enter and exit rooms or buildings, how they're going to travel around, and Superintendent Saywell shared as a parent his experience with ND. And I've spoken previously that some of our smaller secondary schools have an easier time getting students in and out of buildings because they have more entrances per capita kind of than our larger schools. So I'd like to walk through a little bit of information with two of our larger secondary schools with trustees, just to share with you the process of what schools have done in preparing for this. So I'll just pull this one up. So if I make that a little bit bigger. And Trustee Brzovic, I'll just ask you to nod once if that's large enough for you to read the screen. Is that okay? Okay, perfect. So we'll go there. So this is an example from NDSS around their entrance and exits. So as you can see, in order to reduce the student traffic and arrival at dismissal, students will be entering and exiting the building at staggered times. So I'll talk specifically about the times a little bit later in the document. The focus is on where students will begin in the morning with their A block class and in the afternoon with their B block class. And color-coded map is at the end that Superintendent Saywell showed briefly. So you can see that they've divided the school into zones. So if you're a student whose A block class is first period in the morning, you're in zone 1A. If you're in rooms 127 right through to 134, and they'll be entrancing and exiting the building through the main front entrance. So that's how those students will get there. When you see the map near the end of this document, you'll be able to see that color zone for zone 1A, that they would come in the main entrance and turn and go down that hallway to those classrooms there. So each of the rooms throughout the building have been divided into the zones for entrance and exits. So some come through the main entrance, through the band area. They come in by room 146 opposite the tech wing, and so on all the way down. You can see PE classes enter and exit through the 3rd Street entrance by the NAC, so they don't come into the main building at all before they enter into the PE classes. Whoops. Staggered start and dismissal time. So they've designed ways to try to keep students' start times as close as possible, but also recognizing that there needs to be a small stagger to get all of the students in and out of the building in an orderly fashion. So you can see here that these are the zones that are entering in their areas, all on the lower floor, and you can see that they're entering Mondays and Fridays. They have a slightly different time schedule because we have the dismissal early for PLC time on Monday and Friday early dismissal, and then Tuesday to Thursday. So they have their entrance points coming in at 8:25 for a start time of 8:30, and then you'll see students whose classes are in a different zone will be coming in 10 minutes later for a slightly later start time to access those spaces. Here's some information that the NDSS staff have gone over yesterday and today. So as was mentioned previously, teachers have come back into to schools and have had meetings to get up to speed on their orientation. And members of our health and safety committees came in prior to school opening up to complete safety inspections and help put together some of these guiding documents and how to move around the building safely. So some things that are new to the staff since they left in June, as you know, through the ministry guidelines, that staff and students are the only ones permitted in buildings at this time. Guests are not permitted in. Students must wear a mask upon entering the school. So NDSS has also asked at the secondary level that students who are waiting outside to come in mask up while they're waiting to come into the building. So because we don't want them in a congested area without their masks. If they are late for their class time slot, they just go through the appropriate zone and just go directly to class. A little mention, reminder to staff that they went over the protocols for hand washing and hand sanitizing, whether they have sinks available in class for wash hands or sanitize in those classes where they do not. Those spaces that have exterior doors, like their shop classes and their portable classes, students will enter through the exterior door, so they won't be coming into the main building. They'll just be going directly through the exterior door into the class. Hallways are always flowing, so students and staff in a typical year would be hanging out at before school and after school and breaks, and they're going with the idea that hallways are areas to move, not areas to loiter, and then leaving after school. Posters regarding social distancing and reminding around the protocols are visible. Entranceways, hallways, and exits that will be visible. And then of course they've color coded the school map so that students and staff are familiar with where they are to enter depending on which classrooms they're going into. As we've talked about it through our health and safety, washroom protocols have been updated from June. Large washrooms have a limited number of capacity. Urinals have been closed off, 2-meter signage, all kinds of stuff that may seem mundane, but obviously is super important from a health and safety pattern and an education pattern for students new. And here's an example, as Superintendent Sable showed up around the color coding for entranceways and how to get in and out of the building. So that example of this group of classrooms here, 134 down to 142, coming in there, zone 2, and the 127 to 134 coming in through the main one and going this way. So as you can see, all of their traffic patterns are designed to limit the number of students traveling through any particular part of the building. And then there's their second level. I'm going to move on to the next one here, which is similar, and it's just an example of Dover Bay. So I'll also blow that up, and if I can ask Trustee Berzovich just to give me a nod when it's a reasonable size to read. Thank you. Likewise, Dover Bay, a large school with a large student population and staff coming in and out of that building on a daily basis. So here's their entrance and exit and arrival time and social distancing plan. So
hey, Dawn, we can't see that yet.
Oh,
you have ND up there.
Not there yet.
Okay.
Well, you're searching, Dawn.
That?
Oh, okay.
There it is.
Okay.
It's pretty good to me. Maybe a little bit bigger.
Yep.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay, we are showing the Dover Bay one now, right? Okay, perfect. So you can see they likewise have looked at their entrance and exits, arrival times, physical and social distancing plans. So they have arrival times here, entered through the correct entry point. So we'll go over that a little bit later. Similar to ND, they've color coded and zoned for entrance to the closest travel area and correct entry points. And you can see that the arrival times for the 10 to 12s is slightly later, just to allow an ease of students flowing into the building and out of the building as well. So similar to ND as far as the slightly staggered arrival times, and the break points here as well. And then if I stop sharing that one and then share this one. And hopefully the top, if you can just, I'll blow that up for you, will be one that says class and lunch zones, entry and exit points, Q1. Is that what you're looking at? Hopefully that works. Yep. All right. So you can see lots of coordination here on how they've grouped their students on their arrival time. So you can see their entrance and exit. So this particular group of students that are part of a learning group, they have different entrance points based on where that classroom is located, the nearest exit and entrance point to get into that class. So they've done that for the entire school for each and every one of their learning groups, grade 8 right through to grade 12 for their classes, for their different cohorts. And they've even outlined for teachers what it looks like. I've talked before about what we describe as a non-learning group or a non-cohort class, those ones that are multi-grade, and how they will interact. So in this particular situation, this Q1A class, performing arts class, this 10 to 12 class is part of a learning group, so they are cohorted together Well, this group down here, which is an English language learners class that works with Miss Ryan, they would be in their learning group in their other class, in their B block class. So when this group of students comes together with Miss Ryan, they would maintain physical distance or mask up where they were not able to do that in this class as a non-cohort class. And so they've identified those for their staff and students, the grade 10 cohort, and again, those non-cohorted groups so that they know how to interact. Different lunch zones and entry points, so you can see that these classes here have a gym locker bay area, which is appropriate for their learning group to spend time at lunch. I'll mention now that most of our schools, I believe all of our schools, have some eating time in during that morning class, so that when students go out, they're not trying to find a place to sit with friends to eat. We'll go through the lunch zones, and then when we get down to, I'll share the next document here. Give me a second. If I pull up this one. And pull that one up. And likewise, you'll see for, I'll make this, let's make this a little bit bigger as well. So you can see for Dover Bay, likewise, they color coded their entrance and exits. So you can see here the main entrance coming in. So if I'm part of, in my cohort, it's part of this colored cohort here, you can see that I would enter downstairs in the D wing, and there's 3 classes there that would be part of that learning group. So if I'm a member of that learning group, I come in this entranceway, I stop, I don't go any further than here because those are my cohort is in those 3 classes, and I wouldn't be interacting with students who are part of this cohort down here in the shop wing, or these students who are part of a cohort that's starting the class out there, or this group of cohorts is out in the portable. So you can see they've gone to extraordinary efforts to maintain some physical distancing between their learning groups during the day by design, including their entrance and exit ways for the schools. So I'll stop sharing that and just mention that I know there was some wonder last meeting when we talked about what would we be doing if a student might need to be self-quarantined for a period of time, and even what might we do if we had to move from a stage 2 to a stage 3. As you know, the ministry guidelines came out regarding their stage 2 restart and some of the changes to their guidelines around stages 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're ready for stage 2 opening tomorrow, and that's where we're at. We know that teachers spent time in April, May, and June being familiar with teaching remotely to students, and many of our teachers are prepared now. They're set up with their Google Classroom, or they will be using some Microsoft Teams in preparation if students need to be home. We have a hospital homebound model that has supported students who've been home, and that's the model that we'll be relying on throughout the system to support students and families if they have to self-quarantine. Obviously, if a teacher might be part of an exposure event outside of the school and is contacted and told to quarantine at home, obviously we have TTOCs that would be in place while that took place. And so there's lots of scenarios that we've been running through, obviously as we start tomorrow in stage 2, but also in our planning and preparations to have schools ready for the next stage. So I'll stop there. Hopefully that was a little bit of a dive down into some of the detailed planning that schools have been doing to get prepared and ready to welcome students back tomorrow.
Sorry. Mr. Bachman, we have a few questions specific to secondary. Yep. First one's from Trustee O'Neill.
Oh, thanks. That was I typed it there. I just when I was trying to follow along on the map there, Mr. Belcombe, and my question is, I just sort of quickly saw the different stairs. When you said second level, it got me thinking, oh yeah, we have to go on to different levels of our schools. So my question was, am I correct in assuming that these color-coded areas will have, again, sort of the cohorts will be assigned their own stairwell, if you will, by color? And I went to ND at one point, and I'm trying to remember all the different stairwells, and that's, so can you just maybe speak to that a bit?
Yeah, so yeah, thank you for that. So I'll mention, I didn't mention, for example, at Wellington, where, not all of our schools are able to have a separate entrance for every part of the building. So Wellington is very well designed with their circular courtyard in the middle for traffic flow to be inside the building. It's not as ideal for entrance and exits as, say, Dover Bay, where if you're upstairs at Dover Bay, you can enter from the outside. You don't need to use a stairwell. There's an outside entrance for the upper floor. So, Wellington's going to adopt in their hallways, as students are walking, the motto of be polite and keep to the right. So we know that there will be students and staff masking up in hallways because they will not be able to maintain physical distancing because, for example, at ND or at Wellington or at Ladysmith, they will need to use the stairwell to get from one floor to the other. There is no exterior entrance to come into that. So schools will be, reviewing those procedures with students and saying, this is a high traffic area. It's a hallway. You need to be using the stairwell. So you'll be masking up to do that. And all of our schools have also, this is the last part, and then I'll get back to the questions, have also looked at staggering their breaks within the day. So, in a 2.5 hour period, normally we would have in a semester system a full break for students to change classes. And now they're staying in that class, but they're going to need some body breaks and brain breaks to kind of take a bit of a break from the learning. So schools are doing all kinds of little mini staggered activities to have that happen. And it's everything from, odd numbers and even numbers for rooms. So, because if I'm in a hallway that goes, 101, 102, 103, well, if you just go odd numbers, then the class in the middle doesn't move. So it reduces the number of students who are coming out for a break at any one time. So, yeah. Each of the schools have really thought it through, and the teachers have just been back for yesterday and today to join that planning piece, and of course tomorrow and Friday for the student orientation. Coming out of that will be some brilliant ideas to adjust and tweak their plans and make them even better with the students and staff having been in the space together. So,
thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Trustee O'Neill? All right, Trustee Keller, and then Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm just curious to know, with the staggered start times and break times, what the bell schedule looks like.
Thank you for that. And through the chair, most schools will not be using a bell schedule because there won't be the need for that mid-morning break between first period and second period. So the expectation would be that if I'm starting a few minutes later than somebody else, there won't be a bell to signal when they've started or a bell to signal when I'm starting, because otherwise it would just add the number of bells. So it'll be students will be expected to be in their class on time, ready to start when their class begins. And similarly for dismissal. So I've used the example before where Wellington is doing a gradual dismissal, starting with the grade 12s, then 11s, then 10s, and then 9s and 8s throughout the building. They wouldn't want to ring a bell to dismiss their grade 12s, and then 5 minutes later be ringing another bell. It would just be endless bells. So most schools have said, we're shutting the bells off. We're going to look at our clocks and our smartphones and watches and be in the right place at the right time.
All right, Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. Thanks for all the information, and that was very helpful to see those large secondary schools and see how they're doing it, and I'm really appreciative of all the work that's gone into that. My question is about continuity of learning that you mentioned around the hospital and homebound program. So I'm wondering, knowing that particularly the secondary level that we're using the quartermaster and that each day is sort of like almost a week, how do we make sure that that there is continuity of learning for students who go off sick for 2 days? That's a lot of school. So how do we really make sure that continuity of learning is happening beyond just a 14-day quarantine, but the 2 days that they might be sick if they had something different like tonsillitis or something like that this year?
Yeah, and thank you for that question, because that will come up, and we don't know the number of students who might stay home sick and might be symptomatic, might be contacting health officer for some advice. What we have done is we've embedded our learning coordinators in each of our secondary schools this week to get some feedback around some of the things that teachers would like some support with, and that's one of the things that has come up is how do I support students who might be home for 2 days, or how do I support 5 or 6 of my students who might be home for 4 or 5 days. And of course, one of our questions that we'll be working with, as we heard from Dr. Banusik last week, was how will we know and what indicators will we have if and when we might be moving between stage 2 and stage 3, because that looks different, very different if you're a teacher who's having half the students come in and half the students learn remotely, versus having 100% of your students in attendance, and that in-between thing that Trustee Higginson just talked about, right? A number of students who might be away for a day or 2 or 4 days, and if that 4 days, happens around a long weekend, around Thanksgiving or something, that's a significant chunk of time. So we don't have all the answers exactly how to do that yet, other than we know we need to support this system to be prepared for all of those scenarios going forward.
All right. Do you have a follow-up, Trustee Higginson? Okay. Trustee O'Neill, did you have a second question you wanted to ask, or was that from before?
I did. It's a little bit related to before. Well, first, I think it's related to before because I'm a bit of a visual person, so I was really looking at those maps. And I guess I want to say, boy, I'm glad I'm not in school anymore, because it's reminding me of how stressful it was trying to, go into a new school and get the sense of the lay of the school and the block system. Boy, that block system, I think I finally figured it out by grade 12. But so I'm thinking of those new students, right, who had very minimal opportunity to be in the school, and now they're only going to really see part of the school in many ways. So I was looking at those maps, and one of the things that drew my attention was this. There was what looked like a white space. I think maybe D108 or 106, and for all I know, that could be a staff space. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Belcombe, you mentioned earlier that we had discussed this and the different phases and what we would be looking at this point in time. I just wanted to clarify, does this mean that in our schools there is no, currently sort of no unused or empty space where there hasn't been a grouping assigned? Is that the case, or do we have some spaces that are available and unassigned? I hope that makes sense.
No, thank you for that, because it reminds me of something I should have shared a little bit earlier, but I'll answer that question by saying schools have utilized all of the spaces available to them. If they have not assigned a learning group that space, they've assigned those spaces as spaces for some of those non-cohort groups to use additional space. And the example I come back, and I'm sure there is a class out there, but a textiles class that might be a grade 9, 10, 11, 12 class, where to maintain physical distancing between cohorts, you couldn't have 24 or 26 students on a machine each, so you might stagger the use, and they would need a breakout space. So if there's additional space in that room, they're using that space. A lot of our multi-purpose spaces being designated for some of those students. Our learning commons, our libraries are being used for that. At Cedar Secondary, we had 2 classrooms that were closed for enrollment purposes. A number of years ago when they reopened, they didn't open those 2 classrooms. Those classrooms have been opened up for additional space. Right now we're working with VIU. VIU has agreed to provide 7 classroom spaces for NDSS. So right now NDSS, tomorrow we'll be looking at what that space looks like up at VIU, and our facilities folks are doing a walkthrough, and of course there's lots of safety protocols and stuff to be ironed out with the staff at VIU, but that's going to provide NDSS staff and students with some classroom space up at VIU, which will free up some classroom space at NDSS for not just for classrooms, but also during lunch breaks, just to provide a little additional space, because NDSS could use some extra space. So yeah, anything that was whited out that didn't have a nice color in it, our school staffs have put designs on it.
All right. Thank you, Trustee O'Neill. Do you have a follow-up?
Well, I just want to applaud for the planning, and I think you know, I expressed it's a lot to visualize and to take in, and I think the real sort of proof is going to be as students start to enter the schools, and we'll see, and I hope that there's that flexibility there and ability to alter as we go along in this new normal. So thank you for presenting this and working so hard on this for all the staff.
All right, thank you. Trustee Barron has a question.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Assistant Superintendent Balcom and perhaps Tate as well, depending on who's most appropriate. You know, I'm really reflecting on all the information that you're presenting tonight, and you know, I know we've said it, but I do really applaud staff for all their work, because what I'm experiencing as we're walking together through this pandemic is that every time we solve a problem, another challenge seems to appear, and it's very complex. That you know, with every solution that comes up, there's another variable that seems to follow, and so that's what I've been trying to sort in my brain as we're going through this. And I appreciate now the staggered start times and end times, and then the specific areas of the school that students are in, and all of these pieces that we're working so hard on. I'm wondering, however, one piece that I was hoping that we could share with parents and students, if there's anything at all that we can, share a little bit about what options there are available for students who are traveling to school on a very specific schedule. So for example, a ferry or a bus, and they have no choice but to arrive either, you know, their options are to show up really early or really late for these times. And before they would have had a whole routine of, you know, maybe going into the school early. And so I'm wondering if we can share any options for those parents and or students who are looking for solutions to their problem of that in-between time that they're going to inevitably be presented with if they choose the in-school option.
Yeah, thank you for that. I will be happy to respond to that, and I appreciate yes, that a lot of our families have unique schedules that do not fit as nicely with the request from schools to say, please arrive at this time and enter through this door. They can still enter through the appropriate doors, but we know we have some students who arrive early for a variety of reasons, and students who leave quite late for a variety of reasons. So when you look at a school the size of Wellington, you know, where you've got 900 students coming into that building, students will come early, and there is room for them to be, you know, if there's 50 students in the building, you know, by 8 o'clock, that's okay, because they can maintain physical distancing, and that's totally appropriate for them to be able to do that. And likewise, as we dismiss, and we know that most students will be going home or getting on a bus or getting picked up or walking home. We also know that some students' routines will be, you know what, I'm at school till 4 o'clock because that's when my end of my day at school kind of works out, and that's okay too. It's that control thing allows for those one-offs. And you know, our Gabriola students get on a ferry, and we can't split them up by grade and say, please arrive at this time or that time. So they're going to arrive on the bus from Gabriola, and they're going to arrive at NDSS, and some students are going to arrive at Quarter Way, and the schools will be prepared for that. They'll know that they'll be coming, and we'll be able to accommodate that.
Did you have a follow-up, Trustee Barron?
No follow-up. I really appreciate the information.
Right. Thank you. We have now a question from Deepak. Miss Lee, would you like to say your question, or would you like me to read it for you?
I can do it.
Yeah, thank you.
Through the chair. I just have a question regarding DL students who are also, so they're registered, say, for instance, at Dover Bay, but they're taking a class through Island Ed as well. How are those students supported in the school? Because they're part of a cohort at Dover, but they might also need help with that DL class sometime during the day. Exactly.
And so I'll use Dover Bay as an example because and our schools have embedded DLs. So there's Island Connected staff that are embedded in each of our 4 largest high schools. And so we have a computer lab space set up for them. Obviously, if I'm in a morning class within my cohort, let's say I'm doing English 11 in my cohort class in the morning, that's part of my learning group. And then in the afternoon, I have a DL block. Well, my DL block will have students from other grades who are also doing a DL supported block. So that will not be a learning group class because there'll be students in grade 11 or 12 from different learning groups. So students will need to maintain physical distancing when they're in that DL block. So for example, at Dover Bay, what they've done is they've taken their DL support block, but they've also taken a computer lab and designated that as an additional DL support space because they know that instead of having a full class, they're going to, maintain physical distancing. So in a computer lab, it won't be every computer, it'll be every other computer. So they've added some space. The other thing that schools will be addressing is the change between students who normally would have had 4 classes in a semester, and one of them would have been DL, which might have been in the middle of the day. They would go to period 1, period 2, lunch, DL block, and then a 4th period class. Now we know that we're going to have some grade 12 students who are going to have a morning class and then a DL class in the afternoon, and they might have a job that they want to go to. So we're going to have schools who are going to be communicating with families on whether that student is going to be in attendance 5 days a week for that DL block, or whether they're going to be in attendance 4 days a week and maybe they're going to be working, an afternoon shift at a job. So there's a lot of new pieces to the DL puzzle, but schools are providing space for those DL students to stay at school and do that work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any follow-up or you? No, okay, good. All right, do you have anything else, Mr. Balcom? Do we have any other questions for Mr. Balcom? Okay, and I think next from Speaking Preliminary Services was going to be, who's next?
Director of Instruction Poulin, I believe, was going to.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'd just like to say good evening, and I'm glad to be here tonight and have an opportunity to share just a little bit of information with you. I'm going to just be sharing some information around our K-7 learning frameworks and some of the pieces we've done with that. So I've been working with our learning coordinators to create some learning frameworks that are more like curriculum mapping in our main key areas. So language arts, numeracy, social studies, and science. These are meant to support our teachers and our learners out there in regards to just mapping out a yearly overview. So taking our learning standards and spreading them out over the year in a format and a structure that may support our teachers. We will be sharing these out, and we admin have been sharing them out with teachers, and we'll be going up onto our NLPS Learns site soon. With the idea being that we'll be breaking our learning standards down into 2-month chunks. So September, October, we'll have kind of some key areas, and then November, December. The idea being that this would support if our students are, transitioning in and out of a classroom, if they're in the transition plan or if they're having to have some time off, then we would have a sense of what each grade level is working at. These, of course, are just to support our teachers and could be their yearly overviews and suggestions for them. And then we're taking that one step further and building them by the 2-month blocks so that we'll have some in-class instruction ideas and suggestions, as well as some at-home suggestions that could be used and supported as well. And we'll be using our teachers in the field to support and add to that and build with it. So it's a collaborative process right across. And then as Assistant Superintendent Balcom mentioned as well, we've also embedded our learning coordinators into our secondary schools in the last couple of days to have them get a sense directly from our secondary teachers of how we can best be working to support them and students in the coming months.
Thank you. That is very exciting. Do we have any questions for Ms. Poulin? No, okay. Oh, Trustee Keller.
Thank you through the chair to Ms. Poulin. I'm just curious how the, I'm sorry if I got the phrase wrong, the maps you're referring to, the curriculum maps, I believe?
Yes.
How those might help us transition between stages, and if that was part of the intent.
No, it is definitely part of the intent, and it would be so that we could have our learning coordinators also supporting our teachers with ideas and resources based on various different learning standards that are happening in those different timeframes. So, for example, if we had a grade 3 group that was in November, December, we would be able to say, here's some of the numeracy concepts that are being covered there, and our learning coordinators would be able to provide ideas and resources to our classroom teachers and to families around some ideas and supports for that.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Trustee Keller?
No, that was good. I just wanted to get a sense of how this tool might help us as we move across the different stages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you. All right. And
through the chair, if I may, we just have Director of Instruction, Ted Cadwallader, who will give us an update on Indigenous education to close us off.
all right, thank you.
Right, Assistant Superintendent Tate. Good evening, everybody. Through the chair, I was thinking about Trustee O'Neill's saying that she was a visual learner and how challenging this learning environment must be, being online without those pictures in front of you and those maps to follow. And so I share that same learning style, so I know what a challenge it is. I wanted to take this opportunity tonight to talk a little bit about what we're doing right now to prepare for students to arrive, Indigenous students, and a little bit about looking forward about what Stephanie Johnson is doing to continue with the goal that the board set around truth and reconciliation. So over the last month or so, we've been in continuous contact with our Leaders for Learning education leads for our 3 First Nations, Mid-Island Métis Nation and Tilikum Lalem, seeking input on the things that we're doing, but also including them in the planning around our restart plan for September. Also answering questions by phone, by email, on a fairly regular basis. Starting out this week, all of our staff have come back yesterday, including our Hul'qumi'num language teachers, our AEAs. They've been in school, so they're ready to welcome all of our students back. They've received our startup packages that we would send home to parents, talking to them about the types of programs that are available for them when they come back to school. We also have embedded staff at our secondary schools, as I just mentioned, but we also have outreach staff. So we have 2 outreach workers who've been in contact with each of our Aboriginal education staff at our secondary schools so that they can be prepared to connect with those students who haven't been in school for 6 months. And so we want to make sure that those students understand that there's a place for them, that they have adults wrapped around them, that they don't have to be on site to have those adults be beside them on coming back to school and continuing on their education journey. Last of all, I want to talk again, as I mentioned, about call to action 57. So I've got our Truth and Reconciliation call to action up here that says, we call upon federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal governments to provide education to public servants on the history of Aboriginal peoples, including the history and legacy of residential schools, the UN Declaration, treaties, sorry, I was distracted, Indigenous law and Aboriginal Crown relations. And so our CA at Siyasim, Stephanie, has been lining up pop-up book clubs for the entire year. So she's reached out to a number of high-profile Indigenous authors and non-Indigenous authors. And so what we learned from the spring around providing online professional development, Stephanie's taken that and has started to schedule those pop-up book clubs once every 2 weeks for the rest of the year for our staff across the district to join in, learn from those authors, walk away with some questions of their own. So a little bit about what's happening now, what's happened to lead up to now, and what we're looking at going forward on a couple of fronts, one around student support and one around the continuing implementation of our CAS policy framework. So I will send it back to Assistant Superintendent Tate.
Thank you, Chair. That wraps up the Learning Services update for this evening.
All right, do we have any other questions or comments from anybody? Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. I am wondering, it's not been presented tonight, but it's a question about our response, and it's around French immersion. And there might not be an answer for this, and that's okay, because we're trying to do a lot for a lot of people right now. And I realize we can't the more we try to do for people, the less we can do well for people, right? Like it's that jack of all trades, master of none thing. So we've decided to offer French Immersion DL. We're one of the very few districts in the province to do so. So kudos to everyone who's made that decision. But you know, one of the reasons why many districts aren't offering French Immersion via DL is because of the immersion part of French Immersion. So do we have an idea about how we're going to do the immersion part of French Immersion, or are we just sort of being clear that perhaps we shouldn't expect immersion, but we should expect some instruction in the French language?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm happy to to answer this question. And as you know, when when the district was rolling out options around in-class instruction, distributive learning, or homeschooling as the original three options prior to us offering the transition program, there was a lot of questions from French immersion families saying, would there be an option in French immersion for DL? So that led us to the decision to say, if families want that, then we should do our best to provide it. We know that the immersion piece of French immersion is a really critical piece. And so our plan as we build this program is to provide opportunities for some online learning, whether it's through Teams or other video conferencing platforms, for some interactive oral language immersion piece. We're also expecting that there'll be some opportunities, just like our Island Connect Ed does, for families to come in once a week and have some face-to-face time with teachers. We're expecting our French Immersion DL families to want that with their teachers, to be able to get together, perhaps for some physical distancing connections, for some more immersive experiences. So we're hoping to build that. We've Director Cadwallader's reached out to the ministry, who has acknowledged that they need to support districts in building French immersion online programs. I believe West Van is the only other district we found that's currently offering something for West Van or North Van, one of those two. I think it's West Van. So we'll be connecting with them as well. We're super excited that we have both our principal at Island Connect Ed, who has French immersion experience, as well as the DL expertise, will be immersed in developing this program. And we have our French, one of our learning coordinators, who also has the portfolio of our French immersion, who's super excited to support this. So we know we have the right people, and we know that parents are excited to continue an immersion experience, while we honor and recognize that they are opting for a distributive learning model as opposed to the in-class instruction. So we don't have the answers, but we sure have a vision on how to make it work. And we know that it will require a little bit of patience, just like lots of other things as we get it off the ground, but it's going to be fabulous.
Thank you. Ms. Cornway, I just realized I missed you. Did you want to speak? No. Joe? Okay. Oh, can read. Okay. Just a statement here from the NDTA. Teachers have around teacher autonomy regarding to their classrooms, and while they appreciate the ability of the frameworks, should teachers choose to use it. The whole issue reminder for us around teacher autonomy around that area. Yeah, thank you. Trustee Higginson has another question, but I want to ask one before I forget. Through the chairs, I think Mr. Balcom in particular, in terms of students and skills for life, I know that I know some students who have been in Skills for Life who also take classes in the sort of main building, mainstream, for lack of a better term. How are we working that cohort-wise?
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that question, because that's a question that came up really early in our conversations around supporting and programming those students. So we know that in a Skills for Life program, in a typical high school, though, students in that program will be in grades 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So as a cohort for themselves, they going out to interact and be part of other classes would require them to be non-cohorted classrooms. We just know that we're not able to, because as soon as if I go out to a science class, and Superintendent Sable goes out to an English class, and Secretary Treasurer Walsh goes out to a PE class. If they're at different grades, automatically we've gone beyond the 120. So we're going to support those students to be fully integrated in their programming, knowing, just like that textiles class I keep referring to, a lot of them will be non-learning group classes where they'll be able to be fully engaged in the class but maintain physical distancing from students who are not in their learning group.
Thank you very much. Question from Trustee Higginson for, I believe, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. Trustee Stanley sent a question that she wanted an answer to. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here tonight, and it was in regards to, let me just find it to read it. The 2 schools that do not yet have updated HVAC systems, if that's incorrect statement, but I remember you saying that I think there was 2 left that needed updates. So have they been done? Will they be done? And if not, what's being done to mitigate the risk factors that are presented by poor HVAC ventilation?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. So the 2 schools that have not been done are Solaire and Ladysmith Intermediate. Solaire, actually, the board supported a request in the capital plan actually to time the seismic upgrade with an HVAC upgrade. So it is a significant expense to upgrade an HVAC system. So it's unrealistic that it would be done in the short term. So it's definitely looking at that. So it'll be essentially the flushing of fresh air through opening of windows, opening of doors. I don't mean the exterior door, obviously, for security purposes. I believe Mr. Sabo is with us this evening, and perhaps he can talk a little bit more about that. We're also in the process, he comes on, we're also in the process of examining upgrades to Ladysmith Intermediate as well. I think they're well positioned schools given where they are geographically located up for airflow, but perhaps I could ask Mr. Sabo to fill in a little bit more detail on that.
Thank you, through the chair. It's as simple as advising the schools to open their windows and their doors if they're available. Both of those schools are 2-story schools, so opening doors isn't available in every circumstance, and turning up the heat. And then we're working with the schools to see if there's any other requirements or anything else we can do. We've already checked to make sure that the windows are openable, and that they can in fact get some air in those schools. With respect to Ladysmith Intermediate, we have commissioned a report from an engineer. It's getting underway, and that will estimate for us the cost to upgrade LSI, and we would work to see if there's funding available to make that happen, and of course submit it in next year's 5-year capital plan to the Ministry of Education.
And perhaps I could just add one other piece through the chair, is that if the plan does come back and it's not exorbitant from a price perspective, we may want to contemplate accessing some federal funds. But given the cost of HVAC, we're not optimistic at this point that would be the right direction, given these upgrades have typically occurred with the support of the Ministry of Education's capital programs.
And just to tag on to that, thanks for that detail, Secretary Treasurer Walsh. So the report will indicate options for us and how to proceed. So there may be the ability for us to proceed with lower cost options, or in phases, in fact, where it might see the system being upgraded with classrooms being targeted in the first phase. Thank you.
You have a follow-up, Trustee Higginson?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Trustee Keller, I know you're next on my list, but I'm going to go to Trustee McKay because she hasn't spoken yet tonight.
Thank you. My question is for learning services. I'm wondering if you can share with us an example of what it would be like in your average elementary classroom. So we have a lot of different styles of teaching and ways of teaching. And so I'm wondering, what's it like for students to sit and play games during COVID times versus, that would have been something that we openly just did, learning through play. And so I just wanted to know if you could talk about the protocols that are around that. Are we talking about extra washing of hands? And just expand on that sort of thing. It seems like such a valuable way of teaching. I was hoping that you could just share what that looks like.
Thank you. Through the chair, I will ask that, let's see, Directors of Instruction Steele and Poulin, if you could pop onto the screen and
Sure. Hello, everybody.
could you give us some input to the question that's been asked?
Yeah, sure. So we've been working on, through the chair, sorry, we've been working on revising guidelines almost hourly, honestly, the last couple of weeks. But one of the pieces that we went around last week was to really try to provide some clarity for school teams, because this question is a big one, and it's doesn't really matter what classroom you're in. There's materials in that classroom and kids who need to, you know, engage in learning activities in it. So we added a section around tools and manipulatives to the guidelines to provide some clarity, and what we did was go really thoughtfully through like the whole 65 pages that the ministry had sent with, you know, there's bits and pieces of it kind of all over the place, and so we tried to distill it into some rules of thumb for people to be clear in the expectation and the understandings of the health guidelines, but also give people a way to make decisions in the moment as they're navigating those minute-to-minute lessons and things in their classrooms. So, you know, when you're outside of a learning group, you shouldn't be sharing stuff, right? That's, you know, we need to keep our physical distance from each other. We shouldn't be touching each other. We shouldn't be sharing stuff. So that one's really clear. Within learning cohorts, the guidelines are really also clear, actually, when you really peel it back. We have to be thoughtful about hand hygiene. We have to be thoughtful about limiting our sharing. Not that we can't share, but we have to be careful about, you know, is there a way to keep our group sizes a little bit smaller so we can maybe sit a little bit further apart while we're sharing those materials? We need a way to clean them. So paper we're not worried about, but, you know, there is going to be some wiping of some, like, you know, if there's iPads or technology being shared, we have guidelines around how to clean that in between when it goes from one cohort to another cohort, for example. But there's some general rules of thumbs about being cautious and clean, but we are allowed to use those things, and we definitely expect that classroom teachers will be utilizing all kinds of resources within those learning group environments. Thank you. Director Poulin, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you summed it up well, and that is trying to have a little bit smaller groups and lots of hand hygiene. So washing hands before they would use some of those, and then washing them again afterwards. So again, just trying to minimize it as much as we can, but realize we need the opportunities for learning.
All right.
Correct. And we'll encourage, and staffs are already working on thinking about how they will do so much more of their learning outdoors. So, you know, and encouraging individual activities that can be done, that can still be game-based, or we could play larger group activities where kids don't have to be in close proximity. We can have a screen at the front, a leader at the front, those sorts of things. So staffs will work and be creative in trying to come up with new and improved ways to continue having play as a priority while we're trying to keep the physical distance as well. But it's not going to be no fun grade one. I mean, we're going to continue with, yeah, we're going to continue with the beauty and the love and the joy. They'll teachers are amazing, as we know, and they will create and work with students to ensure that those things happen while they're following all of those health and safety guidelines.
Thank you. That's exciting to hear. Trustee Keller has a question, and then I have a question.
Follow up, Chair.
Oh, sorry. I apologize, Trustee McKay. Follow up.
Thank you. So I really appreciate that input and the feedback. I'm just wanting to confirm that I heard you correctly, that those that way of learning and those guidelines will be within the documents that'll be available to staffs in their schools so that they have them available?
Yes, we did an update to expand that section a little bit today to make sure that they'd have the information they needed.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee McKay. Do you have anything else? You're good? Okay. And I apologize. I got so excited by that catchphrase that I lost what I was doing. Mr. Trustee Keller, you have a question?
Yes, thank you through the chair to staff. I'm not sure who would be best to answer this one. Just with our heightened awareness of symptoms and ailments going forward into the school year, what is our messaging going to be to students and families around children coming to school, students coming to school with minor symptoms, and sort of our how we communicate that and when they're able to come back to school? So Just interested in maybe a reminder, learning a little bit more around what the messaging is and how that will get implemented in our schools.
Yeah, hi, maybe I'll respond to that. The message is and will be quite simple. That is, if you're symptomatic, if you have flu type symptoms or cold type symptoms, then you're going to stay home. And if you have those symptoms at school, then you will be you will get a mask. You will be separated from your classroom. Where you've been that day will get a deep clean, and your parent will be called, and you will be picked up. If that happens, we need to hear through some effort by the parent, typically through a call to 811, that the student does not have COVID. So we're asking parents to do that check every day. We're asking staff members to do that self-check every day, and to stay home when you're sick.
You have a follow-up, Trustee Keller?
If I may.
Yes, of course.
So perhaps through the chair to Superintendent Saywell or others. So if a student is home with flu-like symptoms or other symptoms, at what point are they able to come back to school? What do we need from the family or the parents to give our system comfort that it's safe for them to return?
If students are home with symptoms, then what we heard from Dr. Benuzek was that they should call 811. Call that line, and then the professionals will guide them through what to do next.
All right. Does that make sense to you, Trustee Keller?
Thank you, through the chair. I'll just have to maybe stew on that for a moment, and if I think of other questions, I'll add myself to the list. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had a question. Given this is actually probably more for Mr. Balcom because of the larger schools in secondary, given the staggering of lunch hours and such, will that still allow for opportunities such as social justice clubs and student council?
Yeah, so a lot of the questions coming back from teachers as they come back into the buildings is how do we run our clubs? Obviously, our athletic directors and our coaches are excited to get school sports up and going, and BC School Sports has provided their guidelines, I believe, on September 2nd or 3rd for what their restart plan looks like. So we're in the process of ensuring that their guidelines align with ours, and there's nothing out of line, so that we can have students within their learning groups participating in some of those sporting activities. And clubs will continue on because a lot of students' engagement is they come and they want to be part of a social justice club. Exactly. Or an eco club or whatever, and those clubs will continue. Just like most other things, it'll just look a little bit different, and there'll be a little bit more in the way of safety precautions in place for those students and staff that are participating in those.
All right, thank you. Yeah, that I had a question from a student I know, because they are a big part of their school engagement is the sense of pride they get of taking part in some of those things. So it would be a big loss for some of these kids to not be able to do that kind of stuff. So thank you. Do we have any other questions? All right, and I think, and did you say then that was your last presentation there?
Yep.
Yes. All right, well, thank you very much. This has been very enlightening, and I certainly have appreciated, I know we've all appreciated all the information that you've given us, and you're doing an excellent job, and we have every confidence in the team. Thank you. All right, so we now are on to item number 9, correspondence. There's no correspondence, no unfinished business. New business. Chair McKay, Policy Committee, Annual Policy Committee Work Plan.
Thank you. On page 3 of your agenda, you'll find an information sheet with background and information. The background contains some of the work that the Policy Committee was able to complete last year. And I just would like to draw your attention to the idea that it was the first year the Board of Education in our district had a policy committee that was dedicated to the review of policy. And so there was a great deal of work that went into developing terms of reference and developing a process for how we would determine the work that needed to be undertaken. So some of that came through related to some of that work came in related to board motion, and some of it was done through design by what we heard in feedback from trustees. And so we worked through a great deal of that work last year. And then at this point in time, it was time to review where we've been, how much we've accomplished, and identify the priorities for the current school year. And so as you can see, we have an ambitious list of what we'd like to undertake this year. Some of it may be easier to undertake than others. We have new policies to develop, current policies to review, and we were able to implement, I would say 96% of the feedback that we received from trustees when we sent them a draft to consider. And so I guess there was just really one area that I wanted to draw your attention to, and that was around the end of page 4, where it says the policy committee believes it may be beneficial for the board to use one of their quarterly governance sessions to discuss policies 2.5 role of committees and 2.6 meetings of board and operations. These are very large policies, and so we thought that it might be prudent for the board to undertake sort of an overview red line of what it is about those two policies in particular that trustees may wish to see updated or changed before we try to undertake any sort of updated draft there. And so if it was the will of the board, then we would utilize one of our quarterly board governance sessions to begin that work prior to the policy committee commencing work on those. Recognizing that it is a little bit further down the priority list based on what we've heard from trustees. And so the other piece that we just wanted to touch on is there was a question last year when we brought forward a policy in preparation for it to go to 30-day consultation. And the question was asked is, have we viewed this policy through the lens of the CIHS framework? And so where we've come to is that the learning and knowledge related to the CIHS framework is very individual, and it includes a component of your personal journey considering reconciliation in education and in each of our personal lives as well. And so we ask trustees in relation to all of their work and in relation to policy updates to consider that framework along with our inclusion values, as well as the environmental stewardship policy draft that's coming back, and our goals as a board, and consider all of those things together when you're looking at policy updates so that we can maintain and uphold those values through policy updating and review. And so at this point, we're looking for some feedback. If you see anything around the priorities that perhaps needs to be moved up, moved down the list, or if there's something that seems glaringly missed, we'd like to hear that from you so we can update our work plan. And at the conclusion of that work plan update, we would be layering in this work into the board annual work plan that will be shared publicly at the end of the month so that everyone is aware of the work that the board is undertaking for the 2020-2021 school year. So I'm ready for questions. Pardon me, before I go on to that, I just want to thank Trustee Stanley, who is away, and Trustee Barron, as well as Superintendent Saywell and Secretary Treasurer Mark Walsh. It is a large undertaking to look at a lot of these policies, and it's been a great team to work with in getting this priority to where it is today. So able to take questions if there are any.
Do we have any questions for Trustee McKay or the Policy Committee? Comment, Trustee Keller.
Yes, thanks for the chair. No, I just want to speak in favor of the proposed work plan. I think it's a logical plan to move forward, and it's ambitious, but I think at the same time there's a lot of work to do. So I think it was well thought out, and I support the proposed plan.
Anyone else wanting to speak to the plan or comment? Any comments or questions? I concur with Trustee Keller. I think it's an excellent plan. I think it is detail. I like the level of detail. I think the order makes sense. And so I fully support that we move forward with it as suggested. Now, do you want a formal motion, or were you just looking for a, okay.
Just for information. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
We can move forward from here.
Thank you. All right, now we are heading into, we are heading into question period, but I just realized Trustee Barron wanted to just confirm something about a question from the previous presentation. So Trustee Barron, if you want to just ask.
That's okay, Chair. I appreciate you you bringing that up. It was just more of a clarification around a topic that I thought we were going to be covering tonight, but we can move on from that, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about it in a meeting soon. Thanks for asking.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Matthews has just informed me that we have had no questions tonight from anyone in the audience. So given that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, please. From Mr. Trustee O'Neill, I need a seconder, and Trustee Keller. Anyone opposed to adjourning? Seeing no opposition, we are adjourned at 7:30.